The first time I saw a human, I thought they were broken. Not broken like a malfunctioning star drive, or broken like the coffee synthesizer on Deck 7 that keeps producing what tastes suspiciously like liquid regret. No, broken in a fascinating, utterly ridiculous way that made absolutely no sense from any evolutionary standpoint. I could imagine. My name is Keth-Mor, and I've been studying species across 17 different sectors for the better part of 3 galactic cycles. I have cataloged the Vraxian sand dancers who communicate through interpretive movement, the Quillith who literally photosynthesize their emotions, and even the notoriously antisocial Gremnox who consider eye contact a declaration of war. But humans? Humans were something else entirely. The human in question was sitting in the detention bay of our research vessel, the Astral Tide, looking completely unbothered by the fact that she'd just been plucked from a dying transport ship in the middle of nowhere. She was small, even by human standards, with dark hair that seemed to defy the ship's artificial gravity and eyes that kept darting around like she was taking inventory of potential escape routes. Her name was Zara Mills, according to the manifest we'd recovered from the wreckage. 28 standard years old, occupation listed as freelance problem solver, which I later learned was human code for professional troublemaker. So, she said, swinging her leg from the containment bench like a youngling, "Are you going to probe me, or what?" I nearly dropped my data tablet. In 3 cycles of first contact protocols, no species had ever opened with casual discussion of medical procedures. Most were either cowering in terror, attempting to communicate through interpretive dance, or trying to bite through the containment field. "Probe you," I repeated, my translator struggling with what I assumed was colloquial expression. You know, the whole alien abduction thing. Little gray guys, bright lights, uncomfortable medical examinations. Though, to be fair, she looked me up and down with obvious amusement. "You are not exactly little or gray, are you?" She had a point. Standing at nearly 8 feet tall, with deep purple skin and what humans would probably describe as too many joints in all the wrong places, I was admittedly not what their popular culture had prepared them for. My research into human media had been illuminating, if somewhat concerning. "We are conducting scientific research," I explained, activating the room's translation matrix. "You were rescued from a vessel experiencing catastrophic system failure. Your cooperation would be appreciated." "Rescued," she repeated, and I detected what my cultural analysis subroutines identified as sarcasm. "Right. And I suppose you just happened to be passing by when my transport decided to turn itself into a very expensive firework display. Actually, we had been tracking the transport for 6 standard hours, but I saw no reason to mention that immediately. Human psychology files suggested they responded poorly to implications of prolonged surveillance. Your species appears frequently in our long-range sensor data, I said instead, which was technically true. We find your behavior patterns noteworthy. Noteworthy. She grinned, and I made a mental note that humans seem to display dental structures when expressing amusement. That's one way to put it. So, tall, dark, and purple. What exactly makes us so special? Besides our stunning good looks and natural charm, of course. I consulted my data pad, calling up the preliminary analysis our xenobiology team had compiled. According to our research, humans are the only known species to voluntarily engage in activities with a high probability of death or injury for no apparent survival benefit. You mean fun? If fun involves activities such as jumping from elevated surfaces with only primitive cloth parachutes, consuming chemical compounds known to impair cognitive function, or participating in competitive physical confrontations for entertainment purposes, then yes. She laughed, and the sound was unlike anything in my cultural database. Not the melodic trilling of the Andorian songbirds, or the harmonic resonance of Centaurian crystal singers. It was chaotic, unstructured, and somehow completely infectious. I found myself wanting to hear it again. "You have been studying us," she said, and it wasn't a question, "for approximately 18 months. Your species presents unique challenges to standard xenological classification, such as," I gestured to my data pad, where behavioral analysis charts scrolled past in neat, organized columns. Humans demonstrate simultaneous capacity for extreme altruism and calculated selfishness. You form emotional attachments to non-essential objects and organisms. You create elaborate fictional narratives for entertainment purposes. You engage in physical intimacy not solely for reproductive functions. You exhibit what we term irrational optimism in the face of overwhelming statistical evidence suggesting negative outcomes. So basically, we are weird. Fascinatingly so. She studied me for a long moment, and I noticed her expression shifting to something my analysis protocols couldn't quite categorize. How many other species have you studied? 237, not including subspecies variations. And how many of them would you describe as fascinating? I paused, realizing I'd never been asked that particular question before. Define fascinating. Unpredictable. Surprising. The kind of thing that makes you want to stick around and see what happens next. The answer came without conscious thought. 1. Her grin widened. Just one, huh? Lucky us. That was when the alarm started. The containment bay's soft blue lighting shifted to harsh red as emergency klaxons echoed through the ship's corridors. My communication implant crackled to life, broadcasting the voice of Commander Thex-9 in urgent tones. All research personnel report to stations immediately. We have multiple contacts approaching, designation unknown. Weapons signatures detected. This is not a drill. I looked at Zara, who had gone very still on her bench. The casual humor had vanished from her expression, replaced by something sharp and calculating. Unknown contacts, she said quietly. How unknown are we talking? I don't know. Our long-range sensors, no. She was standing now, moving to the containment field's edge. You don't understand. My transport wasn't experiencing system failure. It was shot down. The words hit me like a gravitational wave. Shot down? By whom? That's a very good question. She looked at me with an expression I was beginning to recognize as distinctly human determination mixed with what they termed aerially bad news. But I've got a feeling we are about to find out. Another alarm joined the first, this one indicating hull breaches. The ship shuddered, and I watched Zara's casual demeanor completely evaporate. How good are your shields? She asked. Excellent. Military-grade deflectors, redundant power systems, emergency protocols. How good are your weapons? We are a research vessel. Our armaments are primarily defensive. She closed her eyes and muttered something that my translator tagged as profanity with possible religious connotations. When she opened them again, they held a look I'd never seen on any of the 237 species I'd studied. You're going to want to let me out of this containment field, she said. I cannot authorize. Look, purple guy, Keth-Mor. Right, Keth-Mor. I appreciate the scientific curiosity, I really do. But whoever shot down my transport probably followed the debris trail straight to your ship. And if they're willing to attack a civilian transport, they're definitely not going to hesitate to turn your nice research vessel into scrap metal. The ship shook again, more violently this time. What do you propose? I asked, though I suspected I already knew the answer. I propose you let the professional problem solver do what she does best. Her smile was sharp enough to cut through hull plating. Solve problems. It was, I reflected later, probably the first of many moments when human logic would completely override my better judgment. I deactivated the containment field. Zara stepped out, rolled her shoulders like she was preparing for physical exertion, and looked around the detention bay with new interest. Right then, first things first, I need to get to your bridge and see what we're dealing with. Second, I need to know what kind of manufacturing capabilities you have on board. Third, please tell me you have some kind of emergency combat protocols. We have evacuation procedures. That's not what I asked. Another impact, this one strong enough to knock me off balance. Zara, somehow, remained perfectly steady. Your people, she said, they don't fight much, do they? We are researchers, scientists. We seek to understand, not to destroy. Yeah, well, sometimes understanding means learning how to not get blown up by whoever's shooting at you. She was already moving toward the door. Come on, Keth-Mor. Time for some on-the-job training in human problem solving 101. As we moved through the corridors toward the bridge, I couldn't help but notice how her behavior had changed. The casual, almost flippant attitude was gone, replaced by something focused and predatory. She moved through the ship like she'd been aboard for years, instinctively knowing which corridors led where, which sections would provide cover, which routes offered the fastest access to critical systems. "How do you know the ship's layout?" I asked as we approached the junction. "I don't, but ships are ships, regardless of who built them. Bridge up high for visibility and protection, engineering down low for stability and access, weapons and shields somewhere in between for optimal power distribution." She paused at the corner, listening to something I couldn't hear. "Plus, your people think logically. Logical design patterns are predictable, and human design patterns," she grinned over her shoulder, "absolutely chaotic, which is why we're so good at fighting things that make sense." We reached the bridge to find controlled chaos. The Astral Tide's crew were excellent researchers, but had clearly never trained for combat scenarios. Commander Thex-9 was barking orders at stations manned by scientists trying to interpret tactical displays they'd only seen in theoretical contexts. "Status report," I called out. "3 vessels." Thex-9 replied without looking up from his command station. "Unknown configuration, advanced weapon systems. They have disabled our secondary engines and are demanding we surrender our cargo." "What cargo?" Zara asked. The commander's eyes shifted to her, and I watched his expression register surprise, suspicion, and something that might have been relief. They want the human." Zara nodded like this made perfect sense. "Well, that's inconvenient." "Inconvenient?" Thex-9's voice cracked slightly. "They're threatening to destroy the ship if we don't comply." "Yeah, they would. See, the thing is I'm carrying something they really want, and they can't risk damaging it by blowing up the ship." She moved to the tactical display, studying the readings with professional interest. "But they also can't risk me escaping, so they will keep us right here until they can board and extract me." "What are you carrying?" I asked. She looked at me with an expression that managed to be both apologetic and slightly amused. "Trade secrets. The kind that tend to get people shot at." The ship shuddered under another impact. "Can we outrun them?" she asked. "Negative," came the response from the navigation station. "They have damaged our primary drive systems." "Can we outfight them?" Thex-9 looked at her like she'd suggested we attempt to swallow a star. "We are researchers, not warriors." "Right, but you're also not stupid." She turned to address the bridge crew. "Everyone listen up. I know you didn't sign on for this, but right now, you have got 2 choices. Hand me over and hope they don't kill you anyway, or let me show you why humans have a reputation for being completely impossible to predict." "You cannot seriously suggest," Thex-9 began. "I'm not suggesting anything," Zara interrupted. "I'm telling you that in about 10 minutes, those ships are going to attempt a boarding action. They will send armed teams to extract me and probably kill anyone who might have seen what I'm carrying. Your scientific curiosity about human behavior? You are about to get a very practical demonstration." I found myself speaking before I'd consciously decided to. "What do you need?" She looked at me with something that might have been approval. "First, I need to know everything about your ship's defensive capabilities. Second, I need access to your fabrication systems. Third, I need someone who can think tactically instead of academically. I can provide tactical analysis," I offered. "Perfect. Commander Thex-9, I need you to open communications with those ships." "To surrender?" he asked hopefully. "To buy time." Her smile was predatory. "Tell them you're experiencing technical difficulties accessing the detention systems. Tell them it will take 20 minutes to safely extract the prisoner." Will it work? Probably not. But it will give us 20 minutes to prepare something they won't expect. As Thex-9 reluctantly opened communications, Zara turned to me. "Keth-Mor, remember when I asked about manufacturing capabilities?" "Yes. How quickly can your fabrication systems produce simple electronic components? Depending on complexity, anywhere from minutes to hours." "Good. How about chemical compounds? Again, depending on explosives." "Explosives? Nothing fancy. Basic chemical reactions, timer mechanisms, remote detonators." The kind of things humans have been building since we figured out how to make fire burn faster. Our fabrication systems are designed for scientific instruments, not weapons. Keth-Mor, she said patiently. The difference between a scientific instrument and a weapon is mostly a matter of creative application. And that, I realized, was probably the most terrifyingly human statement I'd ever heard. The communication channel crackled to life. Research vessel, your 20 minutes begins now. Any attempt to contact other ships or deviate from your current position will be considered hostile action. Zara nodded approvingly. 20 minutes. That should be just enough time. Enough time for what? I asked. Her grin was absolutely terrifying. To show you why every other species in the galaxy thinks humans are completely insane. As we headed for the fabrication bay, I found myself wondering if my research into human behavior had been academic curiosity or the universe's way of preparing me for the inevitable moment when I'd need their particular brand of creative problem solving. Either way, I was about to find out what made humans so fascinating that someone was willing to attack a research vessel to get their hands on one dot, and, judging by Zara's expression, it was going to be anything but boring. 17 minutes later, I was beginning to understand why the rest of the galaxy found humans so deeply unsettling. Zara had turned our pristine fabrication bay into what she cheerfully called a workshop of organized mayhem. Components that were supposed to create delicate sensor arrays had been reprogrammed to synthesize compounds with names like thermite and plastique. Our precision molecular assemblers were now churning out what she described as party favors with attitude. "This is highly irregular," muttered Dr. Vexcole, our chief fabrication specialist, as he watched his carefully calibrated equipment produce devices that looked suspiciously like miniature warheads. "Regular gets you killed," Zara replied, attaching a timer mechanism to something that was definitely not standard scientific equipment. "Irregular keeps everyone guessing long enough for you to win." I was monitoring our attackers' positions from a portable tactical display. 3 ships in a triangular formation, maintaining optimal firing solutions while staying clear of our theoretical weapon ranges. Professional spacing, military precision, absolutely no indication they expected resistance from a research vessel. "They are preparing to dock," I reported. "Boarding pods launching in approximately 3 minutes. Perfect timing." Zara sealed the last of her improvised devices and began distributing them to the handful of crew members who'd volunteered for what she termed aggressive hospitality duties. "Remember, these aren't meant to destroy their ships. We want them intact so we can use them to get out of here." "Use them how?" asked Lieutenant Korth II, our youngest researcher, who was holding what appeared to be a sophisticated timer device with obvious nervousness. "Well, that depends on how reasonable they are about accepting new management," Zara said with a smile that would have made predatory species across the galaxy reconsider their life choices. The ship shuddered as the first boarding pod attached to our hull. Cutting tools began their work on the airlock seals, sending vibrations through the deck plates that I felt in my bones. "Positions, everyone," Zara called out, checking her own improvised equipment. She'd somehow fashioned what humans would probably call a really big gun from spare parts and determination. "Remember, the goal isn't to kill them all. The goal is to convince them that attacking the ship was the worst decision they have made since deciding to become pirates." "How do you know they are pirates?" Dr. Vexcole asked. "Because legitimate military forces don't usually demand specific prisoners from civilian transports," she replied. "Also, their ship configurations match known raider patterns from the outer spiral conflicts." "Daher. How do you know about outer spiral ship configurations?" "Trade secrets, remember?" She winked, which I was learning was a human gesture indicating either humor or imminent violence. Sometimes both. The airlock breached with a metallic shriek. Heavy footsteps echoed through the corridors as our uninvited guests began their advance toward the bridge. I counted at least 12 individuals based on the sound patterns, all moving with military precision. "Contact in 30 seconds, I whispered into my communication implant. "Roger that, purple guy," came Zara's response. "Everyone remember the plan?" What she called a plan was more accurately described as controlled chaos with explosives. The attacking force would expect to encounter frightened researchers cowering behind inadequate barricades. Instead, they were about to meet something no military training in the galaxy had prepared them for. Humans who'd had 20 minutes to get creative. The first group of boarders rounded the corner into the main corridor, weapons raised, scanning for targets. They found Dr. Vexcole apparently cowering behind an overturned equipment cart, exactly as they'd expect from civilian researchers. What they didn't expect was Lieutenant Korth-2 dropping from ceiling maintenance panel directly behind them. What they really didn't expect was the small device he left on the deck before scrambling back into the ventilation system. The explosion wasn't large enough to cause serious injury, but it was definitely loud enough to make everyone's ears ring and bright enough to temporarily overload their optical sensors. In the confusion that followed, Zara's voice echoed through the ship's communication system. "Attention, uninvited guests. This is your host speaking. I hope you're enjoying your stay aboard the Astral Tide, because checkout time just got extended indefinitely." The lead boarder, a heavily armored figure with what appeared to be too many weapons and not enough sense, activated his own communication system. "Surrender the human-designated Zara Mills immediately, or we will terminate all crew members." "Counteroffer," Zara's voice replied cheerfully. "You surrender immediately, or I demonstrate why human ingenuity tends to make other species very nervous. You are outnumbered and outgunned. Probably. But you are thinking like a rational military force engaging predictable opponents. I'm thinking like a human who's had a really bad day and access to a fabrication bay." That was when the lights went out. Emergency illumination kicked in 3 seconds later, casting everything in eerie red shadows. But 3 seconds was apparently long enough for Zara to relocate from wherever she'd been hiding to somewhere directly behind the boarding party. "Surprise," she called out, and I heard the distinctive whine of improvised energy weapons charging. The firefight that followed was unlike anything in my military analysis databases. The boarders had superior numbers, better equipment, and professional training. Zara had 20 minutes of preparation time and a complete disregard for conventional tactics. She didn't engage them directly. Instead, she turned the ship itself into a weapon. Corridors that had been clear suddenly filled with obstacles that definitely hadn't been there during our last maintenance cycle. Ventilation systems began venting compounds that made breathing unpleasant without proper filtration. Gravity generators started fluctuating in localized zones, making movement difficult for anyone not familiar with the ship's layout. "How is she doing this?" Commander Thex-9 asked over the communication channel. "She's not fighting them," I realized, watching the tactical display. "She's making them fight the ship." The boarding party was trained for combat, not for dealing with an environment that actively resisted their presence. Every corridor presented new challenges. Every intersection offered unexpected surprises. Their advance slowed from military precision to cautious paranoia. That was when Zara appeared on the bridge, somehow having made her way through areas that should have been blocked by the attackers. "Phase 1 complete," she announced. They're confused, spread out, and starting to wonder if this was worth the paycheck. "Phase 1, I asked. "The intimidation phase. Now comes the negotiation phase." She activated the ship's main communication system. "Attention, boarding party leader. I believe we need to discuss terms." "There are no terms," came the response. "Surrender or die." "See, that's where you were wrong. Because right now, your ships are operating under the assumption that you have everything under control. But what you actually have is 12 of your people trapped on a ship that's been specifically modified to make their lives miserable, while I have access to systems that could make those modifications considerably more permanent." There was a pause in the communication. "Furthermore," Zara continued, "I'm currently reviewing the technical specifications of your vessels, which I accessed when you so helpfully connected to our ship's communication array. Did you know that Kryllian attack cruisers have a fascinating design flaw in their shield generators?" Another pause, longer this time. "You are bluffing. Am I? Tell me, does the name Zara Mills appear anywhere in your mission briefing materials?" "The human designation was provided by our employer." "Right, but did they mention what I do for a living?" "Because freelance problem solver covers a lot of ground." Sometimes I solve problems by fixing broken equipment. Sometimes I solve problems by making working equipment very broken, very quickly. I watched the tactical display as the attacking ships began subtle position changes, moving to more defensive formations. "What do you want?" the boarding leader finally asked. "I want you to collect your people and return to your ships. I want you to contact whoever hired you and explain that Zara Mills is no longer available for involuntary extraction. And I want you to disappear before I decide to demonstrate some of the more interesting things I learned during my brief but memorable career in military engineering. Our employer will not accept failure. Then I suggest you find a new employer, because the alternative is explaining to them why 3 attack cruisers got outmaneuvered by a single human and a research vessel full of curious scientists." The communication channel went silent for several minutes. I could hear the boarders regrouping in the corridors below, their leader apparently receiving new instructions. "How confident are you about those shield generator vulnerabilities?" I asked quietly. "Completely confident," Zara replied. "Corellian engineering is solid but predictable. Their shield systems are designed to deflect energy weapons and kinetic projectiles, not localized electromagnetic pulses delivered through their own communication arrays." "You can do that." "I can now." One of the advantages of having 20 minutes alone with a fabrication bay and a really good reason to get creative. The communication system crackled back to life. "We will withdraw our boarding parties. But this matter is not concluded." "Fair enough," Zara said. "But next time you might want to do a little more research on your targets. Professional courtesy and all that." Over the next hour, I watched the most surreal tactical withdrawal in recorded military history. The boarding party extracted from our ship with obvious reluctance, their equipment mysteriously malfunctioning at inconvenient moments. The attacking vessels powered down their weapons and began moving to departure positions, but not before experiencing a series of minor system failures that left them dead in space for several minutes each. "Insurance policy," Zara explained when I asked about the malfunctions. "Those electromagnetic pulses I mentioned, they're not just theoretical anymore." When the last attacker finally disappeared from our sensor range, the bridge crew stood in stunned silence. 3 military-grade vessels had just retreated from a research ship crewed by scientists and 1 human with an attitude problem. "How?" Commander Thex-9 asked, speaking for all of us. "Human psychology," Zara replied, settling into an observer's chair like she belonged there. "Every other species in the galaxy fights logically, assess strengths and weaknesses, develop tactics based on available resources, engage according to established military doctrine. Humans fight emotionally. We get angry, we get creative, and we do things that make absolutely no sense until they work. And when they don't work," I ask, "then we die horribly, but we die in ways that make everyone else really nervous about fighting the next human they meet." She had a point. In 3 cycles of xenological research, I'd never encountered anything like the past few hours. Zara had turned a routine extraction mission into a psychological warfare exercise that left professional military operators questioning their life choices. "So," she said, looking around the bridge, "anyone want to talk about that trade secret I'm carrying?" "Actually, yes." After watching her single-handedly defeat 3 attack cruisers through pure audacity and improvised explosives, I was extremely curious about what someone would consider valuable enough to justify military action. "What exactly are you transporting?" Commander Thex-9 asked. Zara reached into her jacket and pulled out a small, innocuous-looking data storage device. "This contains complete technical specifications for human military hardware, including detailed analysis of weaknesses in alien defensive systems, compiled during recent conflicts in the Outer Spiral." The bridge went very quiet. "You're a spy," I said. "I prefer independent intelligence contractor. But yes, essentially. And before you ask, no, I'm not working against your people. This data was collected specifically to identify vulnerabilities in systems used by raiders and pirates. The same people who just attacked your ship. Why would anyone want to prevent that information from reaching its destination?" Dr. Vex Cole asked. "Because some of those raider organizations are funded by people who prefer that the galaxy remain dangerous for civilian shipping. War is profitable if you're selling to both sides. I felt several pieces of a complex puzzle clicking into place. The attack on your transport wasn't random, not even slightly. Someone very much wanted to make sure this data never reached the Galactic Security Council. Unfortunately for them, they made the mistake of thinking one human would be easy to eliminate quietly. And instead, they ended up attacking a research vessel full of scientists who'd spent 18 months studying human behavior, I observed. Cosmic irony at its finest. She stood and handed me the data device. Consider this a thank you gift for the rescue, and for letting me demonstrate why your research conclusions about humans being fascinatingly unpredictable were completely accurate. I took the device, noting its ordinary appearance. Such a small thing to cause so much trouble. What will you do now? Find another transport to the Security Council. Deliver my report. Probably get shot at by more pirates. She shrugged like this was routine inconvenience. Just another day in the life of a professional problem solver. You could remain aboard the Astral Tide, I suggested. Continue participating in our research. Tempting, but I've got a job to finish, and frankly, I think you have learned everything you need to know about humans for now. She was probably right. In the span of a few hours, she'd provided more practical data about human psychology and capabilities than 18 months of theoretical analysis. Sometimes the best research happened when you least expected it. One question, I said as she prepared to leave. When you first arrived, you asked if we were going to probe you. You seemed to expect it. Human popular culture has some very specific ideas about alien contact scenarios. Most of them involve uncomfortable medical procedures and bright lights. And you weren't concerned about this possibility? Her grin was pure human mischief. Keth-Mor, after today, do you really think I'd be the one who should be worried about uncomfortable encounters with alien technology? Point taken at S. I watched her board the transport we'd arranged to carry her to the nearest trade station. I reflected on the past day's events. My research had sought to understand what made humans unique among galactic species. The answer, it turned out, was simpler and more terrifying than I'd expected. Humans didn't just think outside conventional parameters. They thought outside the concept of parameters entirely. They turned disadvantages into advantages, weaknesses into strengths, and impossible situations into opportunities for creative problem solving. Most species evolved to survive in predictable environments. Humans evolved to thrive in chaos. And judging by today's demonstration, the galaxy was probably a much more interesting place because of it. Though I did make a note in my research files. When studying humans, always maintain adequate insurance coverage and keep emergency evacuation procedures readily available, just in case they decide to get helpful.